in this chapter, we're going to be covering the subfloor and insulation. And before all that goes down, it's really important also to discuss the layout and how are you going to lay out the van, because you do want to put anchor points in prior to putting your final plywood over your subfloor. So we're going to get into all that detail. Again, thank you for stopping in. If you haven't seen any of the other videos, there will be a 22 video series here, and they are all listed in the description as they roll out. Feel free to click on the other items, and I hope you enjoy the series. Thank you. This is the flooring again for my 2017 Sprinter van 170 wheelbase. When I bought this van new, it did come with this flooring kit, and this is the X23 flooring package that came with the Mercedes-Benz, and it included a rubber floor, a plywood base, all these tie downs, the rubber cover, all this metal stripping that you see here. So we did have to remove that. And the other thing that we had to remove is this plastic trim piece here with the light. And the reason we had to remove this, number one, is the floor was going to be lifted up 1 inch. But the other thing that we were going to be doing is that we wanted to disconnect this light from the battery system, so when this door is open, it doesn't discharge the battery. I love the fact that Mercedes did put all these tie down anchor points in here, which is really a bolt in the floor or a nut in the floor that lets me tie and anchor things down in the system as we go forward. This is the van with everything out of it. We'll get a couple different images here. And then here's the side of the van. So the next thing is what do you do and how do you start? One of the things you really want to do is lay out what the dimensions of the van are, as I did here. These are the estimated dimensions. And the next thing to do is you really want to start to figure out what your van floor plan layout is going to be, and what is the footprint that's going to be required when you're putting your van together. So for me, it was pretty simple. You know, clearly I wanted a bed with a garage. We wanted the electrical cabinet, which was going to store all my electrical gear. We definitely wanted the bathroom. There was one the one main kitchen cabinet. Then I have a bench seat with another cabinet, which we did our water storage in. And then really the other thing is, how do you plan for a stowable table? Once you have that information, what you really need to do is start to lay it all out. As you can see here, this is what the bed configuration is going to look like in the end. So we want to make sure that everything in our flooring matches up to this part. Here is the electrical cabinet. Trying to get all of the dimensions for this stuff ahead of time is very important. So our electrical cabinet here is 28 inches by 14 inches deep. Then this is our shower base. This pan here is a 36 by 24 shower. Then we got to calculate in the thickness of the walls, which is 3/4 inch. So that's 1.5 inches there. So we got to plan for 37 inches wide here. And then when we put boards in, we need to make sure that we've got anchor points along the sides of here that we can anchor this into the floor. And I'll show you all this as we go along. So then these are some of the cabinets. This is what the cabinets would look like. So I got to make sure I've got my anchor points for this. And this is the cabinet, which we got 2 drawers, and we've got our heating system and our plumbing system in there. And then this is just another view. Then the other thing we had to account for is I wanted to have a stowable table. So how do we make sure that this table is going to have a solid base, so that way if we hit it or something like that, we know it's not going to get popped out and screws are going to pull out of the floor. So that's all part of the planning process and what you need to do. So you really need to figure out what it is and how it is you're going to lay it out, and now it's going to sort of make sense. So some of the materials that we're going to need is this Loctite. This is a PLX, super strong adhesive that's going to allow me to glue my boards to the decking, the metal decking, and then we're going to screw the decking into there with self-tapping screws. So one of the things that we wanted to do is, the other thing too, is I forgot to mention, is we use 2-inch self-tapping stainless steel screws. Then we're going to use 1-inch thick foam, which is aluminum coated on both sides, and that's an R6 insulation value as well. So we got a plan for all that. So first thing we wanted to do is to start working from the back going forward. So we put this one board going across from left to right of the van, from the driver's side to the passenger, and then we started going forward with these long boards. So we glue these down, then we would screw them in with the self-tapping screws, and then we would start to put the boards going in between, and then we would fill this in with the foam board. So all this was glued down, and the boards were glued and screwed. And I picked up this aluminum, it's called Therma Sheath R Max, and I'll put a description in there on the material that I got it from. But again, with this is aluminum. It's almost like an aluminum foil coating on there. So that does give us a radiant barrier between the floors of the van. So this is from the back. So the goal is start filling this in, moving our way forward. So as we moved our way forward in the van, the areas that we were standing on, this floor is ribbed. So I wanted to fill the rib in with plywood. So I think this was 3/16-inch plywood that I ripped down on a table saw. And then I glued these strips to the van. When I laid out my boards here, this is all laid out for the dimension, the length and the width of my kitchen cabinets, because this is also going to be bolted to the wall of the van, but also to the floor. So these wood strips are then being used for us to anchor the cabinets into the van. So it's important to really get this laid out the right way. The next thing I wanted to do was to make a secure and solid way of anchoring my table. And the table that I put in here was a Sequoia 3. It's a table leg system made by ITC, and it's really used in the boat industry. But this has a locking mechanism that locks the post into the base. And I wanted to make sure that I was able to anchor this flange, let's call this a flange, to the floor in a way that I could easily remove it if it got damaged later on. So we had to come up with a way to do that. So I had to get a 1 inch thick piece of plywood, and I used 7-ply plywood here because it needed to be the same thickness of the wood and the foam. And what we did is we drew the hole configuration on the board, drilled holes, and then we put in these T-nuts. And these are points, very sharp points. You put them and you actually hit them into the bottom of the wood with a hammer. And then these things are anchored in with these spikes, and they stay into the plywood. So that way on the other side, when I'm screwing on my flange plate, I'll use 1/4 screws, screw into that, and that's solid. So we know the flange is solid to the plywood. Now we've got to figure out how to make the plywood solid to the floor of the van. So what we did here is I got rivet nuts. This is a rivet nut tool, and I've got the description in the link in the description for what this is. But this is a 1/4 20-inch thread rivet. You drill a hole with a special bit, and you got to make sure you get the right bit for the right size rivet that you're putting in. Then this tool actually will pull these levers up, and it compresses this rivet into something very thin. And this is the floor, the metal flooring in between. So what you have is a 1/4 20-inch nut actually in the floor that would allow you to bolt that plywood solidly to that floor, and it's not going anywhere. So we wanted to be able to do that, and this is what it looks like. So we put 4 rivet nuts in the floor, so then we'll be able to bolt that plywood to the floor. And before we bolted it to the floor, we used the Loctite material on the bolt, so that would keep it from dethreading out of the hole with vibration. So then this is the board. These are the hole configurations. We have everything lined up, and we're bolting it down. And this is what it's going to look like later on when we want to put this flange plate on, once we put our plywood down and then we put our vinyl planking in. So there's 2 more steps before we put that in. But this is going to give us a solid, secure base. And I am 100% confident that this is going to be great for me, and it's maintainable in the event that there's damage to that plate somehow. Once we get our flooring completed, it will look something like this. And it's very important that you mark where all these boards are at, because we're going to be screwing the plywood down to these board strips to give us one solid surface. So we got to make sure we know where they're at. Once we do that, we're going to then take aluminum tape and seal everything up, all the wood. So I didn't get a picture of it completed, but I did complete it. But this is what it would look like, where everything is taped and it looks like just one big piece of aluminum. That's what it will look like. And this is what it looked like from the back before I taped it up. So then what I did next is I took the plywood floor that came with the van and I laid it back over the top. So once we were here in the back here, this is where my electrical power station's going to be. This is where my bench is with my water tank, my plumbing, my heating system here. Over here is the kitchen. Here is the bathroom. And this is the garage area beyond the wheel wells. So after I finished the floor, I was like, well, wait a second. I want to put electrical. How am I going to take the water from this side, from the passenger side of the van to the driver's side of the van? How am I going to do that? I didn't want to run it underneath the van. Since this is 1 inch thick, what I decided to do was I wanted to put this electrical conduit in the back, and this is flexible conduit. This gives me the ability, even once the van is done, I could easily fish wires from one side of the van to the other underneath the floor, because you can't do this any other way. And you'll see that once we get to the next section. Once you close up your walls, it's really difficult to do that. So you want to plan ahead of time. Then also the other thing I wanted to do, and I wish I had more photos, but I needed to be able to take the hot and cold water. So the blue is cold, the red is hot, and I ran these pipes underneath this floor. And this is PEX piping, and we'll get into all that when we talk about the plumbing section. And I didn't have all the photos, but I just wanted to show you what this would look like. We wanted to make sure that we had our plumbing going from water tank to the kitchen to the bathroom. And the only way to really do that securely was for me to put it underneath the floor. Once you have all of your plumbing run under the floor, once you have your conduit run under the floor, you have all your secured wood, your anchor points, and your table mounts, then it's time to screw all of this down, and then you're ready for the next step. And the next step that we're going to get into is the sound deadening area. If you have any questions, any comments, please list it in the comments section below. I will also try to put in here all the items, or the majority of the items that I bought. At least they'll give you reference points to whether or not you want to use the same materials that I did. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next video.